The real monster wasn't the one we were hiding from. It was the one we were hiding with. The first hour of the lockdown was exactly what you'd expect. It was a symphony of stifled coughs, the rustle of clothing against the cheap linoleum floor, and the frantic, silent prayers of 27 high school juniors. We were crammed under our desks in Mrs. Davison's AP history classroom, the blinds drawn tight, the room plunged into a dusty amber twilight. Mrs. Davison herself was a pillar of calm, which was strange. She was normally a woman wound as tight as a watch spring, a bird-like person with darting eyes and a habit of tapping her pen against her teeth. But now she sat perfectly still in her chair, her back ramrod straight, facing the locked classroom door, as if it were a disobedient student. Her composure was the only thing keeping the fragile bubble of order from bursting. Outside, the world had gone silent. The initial chaos, the distant shouts, the panicked sprint of footsteps in the hall had faded, leaving a thick, humming quiet that was somehow worse. It was the kind of silence that lets you hear your own blood pounding in your ears. Every so often, a siren would wail in the distance, a lonely, mournful sound that felt a million miles away. I was tucked under my desk between Sarah, whose shoulders were shaking with silent sobs, and Mark, who was trying to look brave but was chewing on his thumbnail so hard I was sure he'd draw blood. I remember the smell of chalk dust and floor cleaner, and the cold seeping into my jeans from the floor. Time stretched and warped. Minutes felt like hours. I found myself counting the scuff marks on the leg of the desk in front of me just to have something to do, something to anchor my spiraling thoughts. Then, after an eternity that was probably closer to 90 minutes, the intercom crackled. A collective, silent gasp went through the room. Every head lifted. "Attention, students and staff," a voice said. It was Principal Thompson, but he sounded strained, the words catching in his throat. "The situation has been contained. The lockdown is over. Please remain in your classrooms. Police officers will be coming door to door to escort you out of the building." A wave of relief so powerful it was almost dizzying washed over me. I could feel the tension in the room dissolve. Sarah let out a choked sob, this time of gratitude. Mark dropped his hand from his mouth and grinned shakily at me. Around the room, students started to untangle themselves from their hiding spots, stretching cramped limbs, their faces pale but hopeful in the gloom. "Okay, everyone, stay calm," Mark said, taking charge as he always did. He got to his feet and looked toward our teacher. "Mrs. Davison, should we get ready?" But Mrs. Davison hadn't moved. She was still sitting in her chair, staring at the door. The faint light from the hallway under the door illuminated her face, and her expression was one I'd never seen before. It wasn't calm anymore. It was rigid with a terrifying, absolute certainty. "No," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Get back down, now." A confused murmur rippled through the class. "What?" Mark asked, taking a step toward her. But the principal just said, "That wasn't the principal," Mrs. Davison whispered. She finally turned her head, and her eyes, wide and unblinking, swept over us. They were dark pits of fear. "Everyone, get away from the door. Get back under your desks, now." Her panic was infectious. The relief that had filled the room just moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. We hesitated, looking at each other, then at her. She was our teacher, an adult. We were supposed to trust her, but this was insane. "Mrs. Davison," a girl named Chloe said, her voice trembling. "The police are coming. He said so." "They aren't police," Mrs. Davison insisted, her voice rising. She stood up, a small, frail woman, and yet she seemed to fill the space in front of the door. It's a trick. They want us to open the door. They want us to think it's safe. We're safer in here. A heavy, official-sounding knock echoed from the hallway. K-N-O-C-K. K-N-O-C-K. My heart leaped into my throat. Police. A man's voice called out, muffled by the thick wood. School's clear. Everyone needs to come on out now. A few students started to cry again, this time in sheer confusion and terror. Mark took another step forward. Mrs. Davison, that's the police. We have to open the door. Let us out. No, she shrieked, pressing her back against the door as if to barricade it with her own body. You don't understand. Their voices are wrong. Didn't you hear it? Principal Thompson? He said the situation has been contained. He never uses that phrase. He always says the campus is secure. It's not him. Was she right? I tried to remember, but my mind was a blur of fear. It seemed like such a small, insignificant detail. Could she really be certain? The knocking came again, harder this time. Hello? Is there a teacher in there? This is Officer Miller. We need you to open the door. She's lost it, someone whispered from the back of the room. Mark's face was a mask of grim determination. Mrs. Davison, you're scaring everyone. Step away from the door. I'm protecting you. She sobbed, her hands now gripping the doorknob. They're clever. They can sound like anyone. But if you look, really look, you can see their shadows under the door. They're too tall. Their shadows are wrong. A few of us, myself included, couldn't help but look. In the thin crack of light, I could see the dark shapes of feet, just as you'd expect. But were the shadows long, distorted? Or was it just her words playing tricks on my mind, planting a seed of doubt that was now sprouting into full-blown terror? My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was a text from my brother, a freshman. They're letting us out. Cops are everywhere. We're safe. See you outside. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Proof. It was over. She was wrong. Look, I said, my voice cracking as I scrambled to my feet. I held up the phone for her to see. My brother, he's in the other building. He just texted me. It's really the police. I tried to move toward her to show her the screen. Mrs. Davison's head snapped in my direction, her eyes locking onto the phone's faint glow. For a second, her frantic expression wavered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. But then it hardened again into something worse, something cunning. They can do that, too, she hissed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. They can control the phones, make them say anything. It's all part of the trick. That's when Mark decided he'd had enough. That's it. I'm getting out of here. He strode toward the door, his jaw set. Two other guys got up to back him up. Mrs. Davison, get out of the way, now. She didn't move. She just watched him approach, a strange, sad smile on her lips. You foolish boy. You'll lead them right to us. When Mark reached for her arm to gently pull her aside, she moved with a speed that was shocking. She didn't fight him. Instead, she slid to the side and with one swift, fluid motion, twisted the lock on the door. It was a heavy, old-fashioned bolt lock above the handle. The sound of the thick metal bolt sliding home was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It was a sound of finality, a sound that sealed our fate. The knocking stopped. The voice outside fell silent. Mark and the others stared at the bolted door, then back at Mrs. Davison, horrified. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was just watching us, her chest heaving, a lone guardian at the gate of her own private asylum. The silence that fell over the room was different now. It wasn't the silence of hiding. It was the silence of a tomb. We were trapped, not by a gunman in the hall, or a threat from the outside world. We were trapped by our teacher, the one person who was supposed to keep us safe. And as we all stood there, frozen in a tableau of disbelief and terror, a new sound began. It was faint at first, a soft, wet, scraping noise from the other side of the door. It was followed by a low, guttural whisper, a voice that sounded nothing like a police officer, nothing like Principal Thompson, nothing like anything human at all. Mrs. Davison's eyes met mine across the dark room. She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. And in that moment I had no idea who to be more afraid of, the thing whispering in the hall, or the woman who had locked us in here with it.